Good morning and welcome to Mental Health Matters Office Hours with me, Dr Audrey Tang. This is the place where we discuss all things workplace wellbeing, but we do give you a double dose, so if you do tune in tonight to Mental Health Matters After Hours, that's where we talk about all aspects of mental health. On today's show, we are specifically focusing on the idea of invisible work. Work that's done without being recognised sometimes, without being ticketed sometimes, if that's how we record work, and what we can do about it. And the issues that not logging that work can sometimes cause. We're also going to look at things like remote work and how we can make ourselves more visible. We've got Arthur Diejomaoh joining us for this. He is one of our managers from Greater Anglia, and it's great to chat with him because he gives us really on-the-ground advice and tips and tools direct from his own workplace. So let's head over to the main studio. Arthur, welcome back to Mental Health Matters Office Hours.
Thank you for having me.
It was great to chat with you last time and so interesting. And also thank you because Arthur's one of our keynote speakers for our wellbeing events as well. And it's really a pleasure to have you here. Do you mind me asking, how have you seen your organisation change over the years? Have you seen it grow and flourish and thrive?
Well, when I started on the railway, I think the whole railway has changed. And I've been through how many? 1, 2, 3 different rail organisations. So initially, when I joined the railway, it was a bit like the military. You know, you just sat there, learned from your instructor. You didn't ask, why do we do this? No, this is how this is done, and that was it. You only saw your manager if there was a problem, and they usually weren't friendly until you had built rapport with them. So over time, then they would invite you into the team. But nowadays, it's changed rapidly. There's quite a mix of male, female on the floor. People are more welcoming, you know, when you start, and there's a lot of rotation. So in the past, it used to be, you know, you see guys there with 25 years, 30 years, but now there are people, you know, with 2 years, 1 year. So there's a lot of rotation. People are moving on and upwards or moving sideways with more experience. So yeah, so the environment is more welcoming, more inclusive, more understanding. Yes, there's still some old habits that are, you know, but they're fast grounding out, you know. So in the past, for example, something would happen and you would be expected to do your job without being told that it's happened. You would expect, there's a thing called controller's ears. You're expected to hear, you know, to pay attention, hear, and then not wait for someone to say, this has happened. But now, even with the controller's ears, you're still told that this is what has happened. So there's no room for misunderstanding, you know. You understand, I understand.
I love that. I could listen to the way organisations have changed for ages. And I guess one more question then would be, what changes still need to be made, though?
I would say we need to keep going the way we are going.
Yeah.
But also to create this more open environment, be more truly inclusive and truly open, because there are still issues that some people are being hesitant to bring forward. And I don't know if you know, recently they're saying most companies are dialing down back on their DEA initiatives, although we are dialing up.
Good for you.
We're dialing up. I mean, we have a course called Greater Together. I haven't been on it yet, but so it's one that is supposed to be, you know, more inclusive.
Yeah. Now, today's show was inspired by a viewer question. So they have said, this is from an IT perspective.
Okay.
Tickets that are public, so the job comes in, ticket goes in, they can be transparently prioritised and reported on.
Yep.
And so if you want to find that information in a year's time, we can check it, and that's great. However, emails which say, oh, could you just, do you mind if you, or just popping around to someone's desk, oh, could you just, would it be okay, just 5 minutes, that that can't be seen. That's not going to last for a year. And people are getting exhausted. And people are getting exhausted by work that can't be seen. So can we start off with the academic term, I suppose? What is invisible labour or invisible work?
Well, as you correctly put it, it's work that is essential, critical, but it's not often recorded. That is the main thing, I think, is invisible work. And it's something that we all do.
Yeah.
You know, in one way or another.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I get sort of managers and leaders and things, there's a lot of thinking work that's done. But right down through every single job, there will be times where someone just pops around to your desk and goes, do you mind? And that takes another 15 minutes. And then you've got to stop what you're doing. And then, why does this happen in the workplace?
I've no idea why, but I suppose it's one of the ways where, you know, individuals like to not necessarily take a shortcut, but you think, right, this guy or this lady can do this thing for me, so I might as well just do it now. Or especially with the IT, they may come around to solve something else, and then everybody says, I've got an IT problem. Can you solve this? And you know, the guy's saying, log these things. And
then you feel awful saying log it, don't you?
Yes.
Because it's just not, you know, you feel mean. Oh, gosh. So planning, thinking, problem solving, all of those are highly skilled abilities. But we don't recognise them, or rather, we only highlight it when something goes wrong. Why? What's happening there?
Well, it's the classic case of no news is good news. You know,
No.
When everything runs smoothly, it's easy to overlook the good things that people do. So it's a bit like, you know, a car engine. As long as it's working well, no one realizes that, you know, the oil is the one doing all the invisible work. It's when it starts to go wrong, that's when the gears start grinding. That's when we know, okay, my car I need to put the oil in. But the thing is, we didn't realize it until that point.
And do you think we don't realise it? We don't look out for it. You know, I understand we do an MOT on the car, using that lovely metaphor. We do it every year.
Yeah.
But we don't necessarily look after it through the year. What can we learn as leaders in our organisation from that?
Well, I suppose one of the things we can do, which we're doing in my company at the moment, is to spotlight the good that people do, you know, on a regular basis.
Yes.
And it's one thing that we've decided to do a bit more frequently. So every little thing that someone does that is good, you spotlight it. You know, we can have a wall of fame, you know, a thank you note, an email, a praise, you know, just highlights, you know, the good stuff that people do on a regular basis.
You see, I think that's lovely. But in a way, why aren't we doing that anyway?
That's right. So it's done a little bit formally.
Yeah.
But informally, it's not done on a regular basis. You know, it's irregular. You know, an email thank you, a vocal thank you. Yeah. So when it becomes habit, then I suppose we may do it more frequently. But until now, it's not done at all. You know.
I love this initiative, so I'm going to pull at this thread a bit more. Who brought that into your workplace, and how hard was it to get the buy-in from above?
Well, funny enough, they hired a group of consultants.
Really?
Who spoke to the length and breadth of the organization and came up with something called a team code for us. One of the theme codes was, you know, you got to praise people more frequently for the good that they do. You know, you've got to appreciate, you know.
Wow. It's so interesting because a lot of the time you see quite passive-aggressive posts on social media. You see the things like, people only notice me when the work's not done.
That's right.
Was that a common feeling? I mean, has the impact of that introduction of that praise been positive?
Well, the thing is, I think it is positive, and it's being briefed out on a regular basis, as I'll talk through later on as part of our check-ins. which is supposed to be formal and informal on a regular basis. So it is briefed, a pamphlet was produced for it. So it's taken its time to build,
right.
But it is gradually growing.
I like that. I like that a lot. So this is a big question. I don't expect you to solve the whole world's problems here, but how do we make that work, the invisible work we're doing, more visible, especially if we're feeling, I don't want to say take a ticket, I don't want to say that. How do we do that?
Well, if you don't want to say take a ticket, is by showing the logic behind why they need to do a ticket in the first instance. Because there needs to be a record of build-up of, say, for example, that particular problem. If it's a regularly occurring problem, but every time it's being dealt with informally, then when they say, right, where's the issue? And you say, right, every time, I go to the control room, 50 people say, can you do this? But you got no records to prove it because it's not been logged.
Yeah.
And also, it then emphasizes that you do a lot of work, because you can do 1,000 of these little things, but there's no record of it.
Yeah.
So it helps them and it helps you. You say, look, it helps me and you. Even if it's backlogging, you still, if you still log it, then it helps both of us.
That's really interesting, because actually, if it's backlogging a problem, the organisation needs to know about it.
Yep.
And if you're solving the problem, then also the organisation needs. I like that. To go with the IT question, sometimes it feels like it can take too long to follow that process. So I understand what you're saying about understand the logic of doing it. But if you're then thinking, you've just come into the control room, you're right there, and now I have to go to a form, fill that in, do that, only to bring you back into the control room, but you're right there. How do we either change the process, or do we need to get a bit more organised in us?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. Processes are there for a reason, but there's also got to remember the human element. If someone is there instantaneously, as long as you say, well, I will backlog it, that's fair enough. But I think it's a mix of bit of both. It depends on the seriousness of the issue. If it's one that you don't need to deal with immediately, you can always say, look, log this. But if it's an instantaneous issue, you deal with it there and then you can backlog it. So it's a give and take.
There is something to be said about backlogging. How do we balance that with doing someone a favour? You build relationships in the workplace. I did this for you. Could you just do that for me? Where do you draw the line?
Well, the thing is, what is backlogging? What is the issue with backlogging? I don't see it as a problem. As long as the problem's resolved, you can always go back and say, right, it's the paperwork you're completing. But if you're happy that the work's already been done, then there shouldn't be any problem with the backlogging. But it's also about, developing these human connections. If I have a rapport with you and you say, look, can you do me a favor, fix this? And after you fix it, you say, look, can you do me a favor and log it? We both win.
I love that. I absolutely love that. That makes so much sense, because it's like, I've done you the favour, now you just create me the ticket. I love that. Oh, well, we're going to keep you with us, Arthur, because this is a lot of fun, and actually it's a really positive way to unpack this problem, and we'll be back just after this.
Navigating today's workplace is tough.
Toxic employees, endless drama, a lack of motivation. We've all been there.
But fear not, we are here to help. My name is Leanne and I'm a chartered psychologist.
My name is Al and I'm a business owner. And together we dig into the scientific and commercial secrets behind great workplace cultures in Truth, Lies and Work.
A no-nonsense, award-winning psychology podcast brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network. We explore practical strategies for building a great workplace.
We debunk buzzwords and bring you the very best advice around finding and keeping great people, from personality tests.
Personality tests they're mostly bollocks. I don't know what kind of language you do on your podcast. I don't know if people know this, but the man who wrote the Wonder Woman comics is the person who invented the disc.
When more flexible working became a norm, you no longer hurt your career prospects by being the one person who worked flexibly.
All the way to avoiding high turnover.
We recruit and promote people to managerial roles based on their technical skills, not their people skills. This is a very fundamental problem we have, which we haven't directly tackled.
From toxic-free cultures,
Interventions for the individual are only half the answer. Systemic change is the other half.
to sustainable growth.
Thinking beyond just paying somebody a good salary, I think is super necessary now. We have to offer so much more than that.
We have got you covered.
So join us on Tuesdays and Thursdays where we help you to simplify the science of work and build amazing workplace cultures.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters Office Hours. I've got Arthur Diejomaoh with us, and we are talking about invisible work and making work more visible. Now, sometimes invisible work can apply to personal life as well. So we speak of the second shift. We often mean women, but it can be any caregivers, because we've had viewers who've said, well, sometimes as a man, they get back from work and the partner's just handed me the baby going, oh, you look after him now. They need time to decompress. So how does the second shift affect us men in particular, actually, as well?
Well, it is like running a double shift on the tracks.
Yeah.
And funny enough, myself and my wife were talking about this double shift business, and she was saying, yes, how does it affect you? I said, look, it affects everyone. You know, we both do invisible work, because our companies don't see what we do at home. You know, they don't recognize that, you know, how we leave work impacts the stuff we do at home.
Yes.
You know, that's often goes unnoticed. But yeah, it can be exhausting and lead to burnout. So recognizing that fact and sharing and communicating between both partners will go a long way to helping, you know, do the invisible work at home.
I think that you've actually hit the nail on the head there, because organisations don't realise how we might be carers, we might be parents, we might be all kinds of things. You as a leader, you must recognise this and hold on to this. How do you support your team? Sorry, just a cheeky question there.
It's a struggle, because you know, you've got to be effectively the carer at work with the team. You know, you got to listen to the highs and lows, you know, and try to balance them out. But it's a struggle. And as I said, the second shift is one which the organisation is not aware happens. You know, because many years ago, organisations never really cared about once the clock stopped. But the thing is, we work in a different world these days.
Yeah.
Our work is almost 24 hours. You could say it's 24 hours, because everybody's working at some point in time of the day. You know, back in the day at 5 o'clock, pretty much everyone shut. It was the pubs and the restaurants. But now there are all sorts of businesses that go on at 24 hours.
Yeah.
So to realise that, you know, people don't actually shut off when they go home is something that we need to recognise.
Yes.
It is difficult, but we need to recognise that.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's interestingly with invisible labour, and this is according to research, it can fall as a factor of race as well, and culture. So it might be perhaps people with more extended families have larger responsibilities and so on. So how do we encourage the workers? So if you're the leader in the organisation, and exactly as you say, people don't talk about it, how do we get them to talk about it and maybe recognise that the organisation can be there to help?
In terms of the invisible work being a race factor, I think I struggle to see that, because because it's I think it happens for anyone, you know. But in terms of speaking up, we all we can do is make the environment comfortable for people to come forward to speak their truth and not penalise them for speaking up. It is difficult. So if, for example, someone says, oh, I can't come into work because I've got to take care of my mom, the initial response is, what's that got to do with me? But, you know, realising that, oh, hang on, you know, this person has an issue, because even if they come into work, you force them to come into work, it's still going to be playing on their mind. You know, their mindset's going to be warped all over the place. So you've got to look after them, you know, holistically, rather than think, you know, work, home. It's the whole package.
What about the opposite way? So you've got somebody who their mum's in hospital, but they want to come into work, but you kind of know that maybe they're not going to work up to the standard,
potential.
but at the same time they want to be there. They want to be, you know, maybe they need the break, they need the respite. How do you balance it when it goes the other way, but still show that compassion?
It's realizing, and that's one of the benefits of, you know, me studying psychology, is realizing that it's not one cup that fits all. That some people, they need time away from the incident to be able to focus, to be able to function. So coming in does serve as a relief for some, whereas going home may be that relief. You know, and lately we've experienced a lot of people who've had bereavals. You know, they've had to bury one parent or the other.
Oh,
and
gosh.
So some might say, look, I just need to come in and do work to get this off my mind, and others want to stay away from work for a bit. So it's, you know, to get that balance right. You know, having enough time off, but also coming in and doing work to take yourself and your mind off the activities going on at home.
It's really sort of understanding people as individuals, isn't it?
That's right. There's no generic tool. It's, you know.
You're the second guest who said that recently. You know that these tools, these data points, they're getting a bit irritating. We need to speak to people again, and that's really interesting. What about when you're doing extra work or a second shift, and you've internalized that pressure? You don't feel, I don't know, I'm not saying that the workplace doesn't allow you to talk about it, but you have put extra pressure on yourself going, no, that's not the place I talk about all of these things. I mean, how do you as a leader, how do you look out for your team and encourage them?
Well, as I alluded to earlier, one of the things we do is check-ins on a regular basis. So these check-ins, I think they've replaced the formal appraisals where every once in a while you sit down with your manager and we go through the performance. Now, we don't do that anymore. We have check-ins, you know. But as part of that check-in, we still check the performance, but we also check well-being to see how you're doing, you know. And the check-ins, we do that not just arranging a formal meet-up date, but on an informal basis. So when I come in every day, I sort of go around the control floor and spend 2-3 minutes with everybody, but also having an open door policy, you know. So it's not just when I book to meet you, you can come and chat with me at any point in time. So that's what we do to you know, lift the team up.
Do you mind me asking, how does your open door policy work for your organisation? I think you're very welcoming and very open, so I'm sure it probably works quite well. But I've seen organisations where, oh, we've got an open door policy. No one uses it.
Well, funny, the way it works in my organisation is the individuals, they look for who is most likely to be recipient to their complaint. So not everyone will feel comfortable, you know, telling me the what's and all. So they may decide, okay, it's going to be one of my other colleagues that they have a better rapport with, that they will speak to. Or, you know, they go into my manager, you know, the door's office. I mean, his office is open. There is a door, but it's normally open most of the time. So when we say open door policy, literally open door. So, you know, and even if they're not happy with him, they can go above when that manager comes to the floor. So it's such that you can speak to whoever you wish to, whenever you wish to.
Now, I love this. And again, this is probably a personal question. How does this work for you without you feeling threatened by it? Because I know, again, I've seen organisations where if you go anywhere above, suddenly everyone's got really defensive and, oh my God, you know, why are you talking about me?
Absolutely. No. You're quite right. It does happen. People get the hump that, why have you gone? Why you have a problem, but you've gone straight to my manager. Why don't you come to me first?
Yeah.
So why is it you only come to me when it's petty issues, when it's a serious issue? You go straight to, you go straight above my head. What's the point? So no, that does happen, and there's not a lot you can do about it. Except your manager, you could discuss the issue with your manager. If it's a good manager, it will refer that matter to you, or refer the person to you. Say, look, you need to speak to your immediate manager first, which is what we tend to do. Yes. If it's a serious case, you need to speak to your immediate manager first, because if it results in a disciplinary or grievance, there is a process to follow, and if you've shortened that process by going straight to the top, it makes it difficult to deal with.
Yeah. I think that really involves, hiring very wisely by the sound of things. It sounds like you've got a really great team.
I've got a good team. I will say that, yeah.
I think that's lovely. That's why it's always refreshing chatting with you, because I get so much positivity about the workplace. Okay, so whilst invisible is not necessarily, we talk about work that's not seen, remote work kind of falls under that category as well, because in a way it can be measured by the output. How do we make sure the remote worker isn't feeling left out, though, because or not feeling micromanaged because we have to check on you? Where does we strike that balance?
Well, fortunately, in my line of work, remote work is remote in the sense that it's work that has to be done on the floor. But we do have remote workers. We have a social media team that days they may not be able to get into the office, so they work from home. But also during the COVID period, it's a time when we trialed remote working for some of the of the desks.
Yeah.
So what makes it work, or what made it work for us, was we used Microsoft Teams chat a lot.
Yes.
So that's what we use to keep in touch wherever you are. Also, we still use it today in the office, so it gives you an inclusive feeling that, I'm not here by myself. But the Teams chat does take someone to make comments in the chat, but it's something we can use to keep in touch with the remote workers on a regular basis, And then obviously have virtual coffees and informal check-ins, but the Teams chat is something that, so when you're logged on,
everyone's there.
Yeah.
I think that's really nice, because otherwise you risk it being only the remote workers, and suddenly they're now feeling, why are you checking on me?
That's right.
But everybody's logged on.
Everyone's in the chat, yeah.
See, you should be a role model for everyone. Now, this one, I know it doesn't happen so much now because we're not in the pandemic anymore, but when you were working remotely, have you had that sort of sense of loneliness, or how have you dealt with that aspect of it, if you did experience it?
Well, it was the struggle for me was I only did it for a short period because I was lucky enough not to get the COVID, but my wife did, so I had to work from home. It was the having to rely on the team, and then we just introduced the Teams chat, so it was having to rely on the information as it was happening being put in the chat. So there was that slight time delay where something would happen, and if I was in the office, I would pick it up straight away. Certainly, I would then pick it up 5 minutes later at home. So either the route control manager would give me a call and say, right, this is going on, this is what we're doing, or one of the team would ring up and say, this is going on, or I would pick it up on the chat. But that would be a few minutes after the incident has already happened.
Oh no!
And sometimes, those few minutes,
sensitive.
That's it.
Oh my goodness. I'm sort of thinking of all these disaster movies. Imagine if they were taking place over Teams.
That's right, yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness. Did you ever have, so that I can imagine was a stressful situation. Did you ever feel isolated though at all? When you were, would you have preferred to have been there, not just for the speed at which you could respond, but just having people there to bounce that chat off? I
suppose, yes, I would, because there is a lot of office banter. Yeah,
Yes.
that's what's missed when you work alone. But during that COVID period, I would say I wasn't the only one in the house, you know.
Yeah.
So I was lucky that you know, both ways I had people around me. But no, I would have missed being in the office and having the relevant banter, so to speak.
Oh, well, we're going to talk about that one with our resident psychologist, Dr. Meg Arroll, because she's going to be chatting about working from home and making sure we're less lonely when we're doing so. Let's go over to Dr. Meg.
Now, another thing that is, I would say, imperative in terms of combating isolation and loneliness when working from home is making sure that we have some boundaries between work life and personal life. And honestly, I say so much of the time, I'm sure I bore people around me, but I do say that boundaries are the most important part of self-care, self-maintenance, and really self-preservation. So to do that, something I do myself, I have a work from home commute. So this can take the form of physically leaving the house and walking around the house, coming back in. And I'm going to be really honest here that when it's a cold day and a bit miserable and raining outside, I can't say that I do this 100% of the time. But you know what? If it's sunny, it can be really helpful to just walk outside, walk around the house, come back in, and you can feel a sense of separation. Now, if it is a bit of a miserable day, or perhaps if there are some mobility issues, that's not necessarily something that must be done. And of course, we don't talk about must, but something that can be helpful is actually just getting change out of work clothes into personal or home clothes, going into a different room if you do have separate spaces, closing down the computer or laptop or whatever device that you are using to work from home. Basically, setting out for yourself within your working environment something that is meaningful to you to tell the brain that work has finished. This is the end of work time for me. Now, another thing that is incredibly important is to silence some of the alerts that are on emails, on our phones and devices, that are on messages that are to do with work, and making sure that those are only within your working times. And actually, now that we do have some flexible working, my working hours may be different from yours. And so working within your own working hours, sometimes it can be helpful to even have on your email address that, and I actually know that Dr. Audrey does this, that stating explicitly that my working hours may be different from yours, but only respond within your office hours, as it were. That can be incredibly important. So here what we're doing is thinking about those boundaries. So some of those can be physical, some of those can be virtual. And what happens then is this reminds our brain that, you know what, we're not supposed to be working all the time. And we can have a real urge to respond to every email, to respond to every text. And then this way, work bleeds into the rest of our lives. And you may be wondering, well, what does this have to do with loneliness? And it is because if we're constantly working or thinking about work, we do not have the time and space to make those human connections that are about other parts of our identity. So one important part of my identity is I am a psychologist, but that's not only me. I have other interests. I have other things in my life that I want to nurture. But if I didn't shut off my devices, if I did answer every email at every point of time in the day, I wouldn't have the time and space to nurture those things. So think about that. What boundaries can you put in place to make sure that your work is separate from your personal life as much as is possible for you and your job and your career? And that may sound counterintuitive to do with loneliness, but it is incredibly important. We really do need to tend to those parts of ourselves that allow for human connection outside of the workplace. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters Office Hours. We've just heard from Dr. Meg Arroll. She's our resident psychologist, giving us some tips for when we're working from home so we don't get too lonely or feel so isolated. I've got Arthur Diejomaoh with us, and we're talking about invisible work, remote work, work where we're just doing a favour for somebody else and it's not logged. We need to log it, and all of those other issues which we don't usually discuss in the workplace. Now, another issue which can cause invisible work is a lack of resources. So it's almost like there's a shortage of something. To take a personal example, when I was a teacher, there was a shortage of pencils, there's a shortage of dry white pens, so I just bought them. I went out and I just did it, but it's not really dealing with the problem. So how do we just keep logging that there's an issue, or is it ever right to just solve it? What do we do when there's a lack of resources?
I think the first thing is, if there's a lack of resources, it is wise to keep logging it, because there is a permanent record that this is a consistent issue or persistent issue that you have to deal with. So it's like a signaling problem. If it's not dealt with on time, it leads to a bigger issue on the track. So yes, logging it is important, and I think that's all we can say. You keep logging it, keep talking about the issue, and eventually they will find the resources.
Because you keep bringing it up.
because it's so what can start the old saying, a stitch in time saves 9. So when it was initially a stitch and you didn't do anything, now it's 9 stitches. You're going to say, look, I told you, if you dealt with this earlier, and if we don't deal with it now, we're going to need more money.
I'm going to throw you a real life problem here, because it relates. This is when I was working with the NHS. So there would be a lack of resources in some departments, not all of them. And some departments, like learning and development, we had money, but we had to spend the money by the end of the year, because otherwise you wouldn't get to keep the money.
You get the same amount,
So we got nice cups and saucers every single April. Now, this is fine, except for you then speak to maternity. They're out of nappies. They're out of, in stoma care, they're out of stoma bags. And you're thinking, we're getting cups and saucers. But you can't share those ring-fence budgets. What do we do? Because I can see, we did sit there and can we just not give our bit of budget to maternity, or can we not give it? And no, you can't. Because
you can't. It's a weird way of the accounting, where one side can't give the other side money because they have to account for it. I suppose both sides may have to come up with some sort of creative accounting. We bought. You might have to find a reason why you would need the stoma bag. It is difficult, where you've got two departments. I mean, the same thing happens where I am. So we've got the operations section, we've got the fleet section, we've got the information section. And there's always a debate among the fleet and the operations. Oh, you guys earn more, you guys do this. But we all work for the same company. And I know those things are sort of, I guess, more internal to resolve, but it just used to be such a bone of contention. And it wasn't as if maternity wasn't logging that they were lacking all of this stuff. Exactly.
But it would just end up being, this is how the budget was distributed. So sort of relating to that, when you identify issues, I always tell people, have an exit interview, because at least you can voice those issues. It's like logging the problem. They may not solve it for you, but they will hopefully solve it for the person after you. But how do you motivate somebody who just wants to leave? They're so exhausted with work, they don't want to say all the things.
They just want to go. Right, so the first thing to do is to say, right, understand this is how you feel, but you'll be helping others when that come along in the footsteps to say, right, this is what you did, and this is what you experienced, and this is how you felt, and this is what could be done to make things better. So effectively, you'll be leaving like a roadmap for us and for the newbies take on the role that you've just vacated. And this is the process to follow. So give your feedback. and effectively you leave a roadmap for the next conductor saying, this is the part to follow, this is the part not to follow.
I love that. Has that worked? I know in my experience, I have seen after I've left, there were changes that were made. And yes, it didn't affect me, but other people felt a bit happier after that. So have you seen it work? Have you seen it sort of succeed?
Where one person's left, the changes have been made. So, for example, a guy left recently because he wasn't happy with the roster, but the roster was there before he came. Yeah. So it was. So the changes that were made when he left were to make the roster more amenable to people. You know, that they could work around it. There are rosters. But you can also have what we call a gentleman's agreement. Yeah. So, for example, the normal roster is, say, 7 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. But a gentleman's agreement could be 6 to 1. You know.
Right. Yeah.
So the issue he was having, which a lot of his colleagues were struggling to understand, was where were you finding the problem with the roster? So for a newbie coming in, it was explaining the roster properly, understanding that, this roster is a give and take. You win some days, you lose some days, but overall it balances.
That's so interesting. It's the theme of today has been about explaining and giving the logic for why things happen. And yet I think in organisations, things have been done for such a long time, you've even forgotten why it happened.
Exactly.
And then next time a new person comes in, you forget to explain it because you just go, well, that's just normal.
Yeah, just the roster, this is what you do. And you're thinking, hang on, why do I have to do this? Why, no, and then you start to create issues with your colleagues that shouldn't or wouldn't be there.
If you'd actually taken the time to understand it or to remember it and explain it. Now, again, this is a viewer question, and I don't. Again, you may not have a solution to it, and that's fine. But talking of something like a roster and the gentleman's agreement, what if you're a leader, and I suspect you're this type of leader, where you do try and be as accommodating as possible. And, it's to the point where you've taken the time, you've understood your team, they do come to you, they do, and then at one point, they start taking the mickey a little bit. It becomes a bit, this is no longer a privilege, it's an expectation, and yet when it first started, it was well, I will make this work for you, but you've got to understand that this is a privilege. How do you come back from that and start saying no? Because you don't want to be mean, but you've worked really hard, I guess, invisibly, to make the gentleman's agreement happen, and now someone's sort of taking it.
Now someone's broken the
gentleman's agreement,
and they're trying to pin it on you to say, they're trying to make what is not your issue your issue. You're thinking, hang on. So, and this happens all the time, So, what I tend to do is firmly explain to the person, basically call them out, say, are you taking the mickey? Because, I've gone out of my way to do this for you, and now you're coming back with this, what's going on, why? So it's calling them out, up front, what's going on, why are we having this issue? Why are you making this an issue when it wasn't in the first place?
Yes. That's hard though, isn't it?
Sometimes, you got to be brutal.
But you're a leader. Yeah, okay. I consider myself told. This is very true. That is very true. So, okay, now let's flip it to the other side where people have been in a bad situation for some time. There are some organisations that are quite toxic workplaces. Why do we put up with something so much before we actually say something? And then why do we sometimes even just leave instead of saying something?
Well, I put down there, sometimes it's easier to stay on a familiar track, even if it's bumpy. But it's, I think it depends on what is causing the grief. Because I was having a conversation with my colleagues about having courageous conversations.
Oh, I like it.
And say one of the things most people tend to like is to avoid these conversations in the first place. But the issue doesn't go away. It just builds and builds and builds up until it comes into a mighty problem. So, you know, it's about encouraging open communication so that people feel a bit more comfortable speaking up. That's all we can do is you know, make the workplace more accommodating.
Yeah, but we can't solve everybody's problem, can we? You see, this is why it's always so refreshing chatting with you, because it's real life you're talking about. And I think sometimes when we speak too much to people who have left real life and are working in the academic field all the time.
In the ivory tower,
Yes, it's so theoretical, and it's so, well, you could do this, and you could, and I'm sitting there going, do you know what, when you're face to face with someone, it's not as easy to do that. And I think that's why I can see you do a really good job, but you're talking about real life, and you can't solve everyone's problem.
No, you can't.
Actually, there's a cheeky question there. How do you sit with that, and knowing you can't solve everybody's problem?
Well, it's quite, I wasn't going to say quite easily, but no, not really. The thing is, I'm one who, you know, I've learned over the years to switch off when I leave work. When I leave work, I've left.
Good for you.
When I'm in work, I'm in. So it's a bit like that. When I leave, I actually leave work. When I'm in, I'm in. I don't carry work home with me.
Yeah. Really important, really important. That must have taken a long time to kind of make that switch. How do you encourage open conversations in your team? Is there anything that you do specifically, or is it just about being the person who does check in with everyone in the morning?
I think that's part of it, checking in with people, starting the conversation if necessary, inviting others to speak, having the regular team meetings and briefings, and also, you know, we have the internal internet, so a lot of resources are on there, and a team what's it called, newsletter that also gives information about the team specifically.
Oh wow, that's nice. I've not heard of that, because I've heard about the intranet and I've heard about the company stuff. How does the team stuff work?
So the team stuff is, we as managers have meetings 3 times a week, and then once every 4 weeks we do a serious one. So there we sort of decide, you know, this is the information that is going to go on the team sheet, but also in it is about what's been going on the operating floor. So there's an invitation also from the team members to contribute if they wish. Put it on the team sheet,
That's nice. It's the contribution for the team members that we don't always hear about, because everyone talks about it's very top down. You see, we should use your work as a role model for how things need to be run, because you have a massive company. It's like nationwide.
It's a big company, It runs the whole of, I was going to say East Anglia, but the whole of East of England, effectively.
And that means there's so many people to coordinate, and so many people where it's easy to slip through the net, but it sounds to me that you've got some really great systems in place to stop that happening.
Essentially, at the end of the day, you know, a good company is only made by its people, you know, which is why, you know, the company went out and invested in a team of consultants that spoke to the whole team, and we drew up this team code that we're trying to live by.
I love it, love it, love it. We're keeping Arthur with us to give us his top tips. Let's head over to Business Boost. In the interest of speaking up more when it comes to any issues that we might be facing, this is a very simple technique. It's actually an interview technique, but it can be applied to speaking up about any issue. It's known as the STAR technique, and the S stands for situation, T stands for task, A stands for action, and R stands for result. And this is where, if you take it in turn, you outline the situation, you look at what you did and your contribution, the action that happened not necessarily whilst you were doing it, but it could be the actions you took, it could be the actions that occurred after you dealt with what was going on, and then look at the results. Now, what tends to happen in speaking up situations or in interview situations when you're using the STAR technique is that there's a real focus on the situation only, on the background, on the context, on all the information that doesn't actually talk about what you did. So when it comes to using the STAR, it's a great acronym to follow: situation, task, action, result. But don't spend too long on the situation. Really focus on what you had to do, how you did it, and what came out of that. Give that a go and let us know in the comments how you get on. Well, welcome back to the final part of Mental Health Matters Office Hours. It's been such a joyful conversation, as always, with you, Arthur, because I love the way that your organisation is doing what you talk about, and I think that's really important. I mean, for me, one of the key things that's come out there is just always keeping those lines of communication open and explaining things, because the reason why I think we have so many problems is because we don't explain things enough. So, can you give your 3 top tips, please, for getting people to speak up more in the workplace?
Right, so the first, I would say, is leading by example. Show that I value, or we value, feedback by acting on it and recognizing those who speak up. Having the regular check-ins, which I talked about earlier, making it a habit to check in with my team, both regularly, formally and informally, and finally, creating this safe space, encourage open dialogue, and ensure that there are no repercussions for speaking up.
That's the biggest thing, isn't it? It's the no repercussions for speaking up, because I think you never get change unless people say...
That's right.
So I think that's a good example to be following, actually. Arthur, thank you so much, as always.
Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. Very, very joyful conversation. And tune in next week and have a healthy week.